And hello and welcome to another fireside chat under the GenCap Academy. It is my pleasure once again to introduce a dear friend, somebody I've known for a few years, I guess. It's my pleasure to introduce Liz Adnett. Afternoon, Liz. How are you?
Afternoon, Stuart. I'm very good, thank you, and thank you for asking me to join you today.
Well, no, it's a pleasure to get you on to this. For the benefit of our listener, could you just explain a little bit about your background? We don't need to go all the way back to school days, but in your business. So let's find out about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I've spent over 25 years in asset management, which makes me feel very old. Majority of that has been in distribution, and I've worked across many different asset classes during that time. So everything from your sort of traditional side, your fixed income, equities, real estate, alternatives, now also digital assets and crypto. I've had the privilege of working with some of the big global names through to sort of specialist boutiques and everything in between. I've obviously been distributing products. I've helped to launch new products, change distribution strategies, open new markets, all of those kind of things that are involved in distribution. I've obviously, during the course of that time, met with probably thousands of allocators, sat in thousands of meetings, and have been lucky enough to sort of experience what works and obviously what doesn't work as well. So that's me in a nutshell.
Blimey, that's a lot. Our paths crossed at Insight back in the noughties. I remember that, and that's when you first got into fund distribution. Back then, the market was very different. And let's get into the crux of what we're going to talk about today, because I, for one, I've been around a lot longer than you, and that's clear. But I don't think I've ever experienced a market capital raising time as we're currently going through right now. The first 6 months of this year have been an absolute car crash as far as raising assets. Some have done very well, some haven't done so well. I mean, the uncomfortable truth here is that a lot of funds aren't gaining traction. From your point of view, why do you see that?
Yeah, so I mean, as you say, it's changed a lot. And I've, during the course of the quarter of a century I've been doing this, I've seen so many funds that have really struggled to raise assets. And as you say, especially at the moment, you look at the performance of the fund and it's all there. The track record's there, the risk management's there, all those boxes are being ticked. The fund manager is very presentable. I think one of the key reasons is the story isn't clear enough. People aren't always sure what it exactly is someone's doing. And, for an example, I worked with a manager once he had everything that I've just gone through, but actually the pitch, I remember the first time I met them, they turned up with a 50-page pitch, and immediately it started going into the jargon and the technical side of it. And it lost me. And I was obviously putting myself in the shoes of the allocators that I knew. And I thought people are immediately going to be switching off from this, because I've heard this at family office conferences. I've heard it at wealth manager conferences. People need to explain what they do quickly and concisely in the first few sentences, whether that's in a LinkedIn message, whether it's in an email, whether it's on a phone call. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is simple. You can get into all the technical stuff later on down the line. But if you can't explain why you launched your product and what use it is to the allocator or the investor that you're trying to speak to, you're never going to get past that very first meeting or that initial introduction.
Yeah.
So I think there's more to it, but I think the story, what you're actually doing, that clear, concise message, is where a lot of firms are falling down.
Yeah, I think we'll touch on this later on when we talk more about some of the smaller managers and how they can differentiate. But the challenge, to get assets through the door I'd say it's never been as difficult as it is now. And yet everybody still wants to come into the UK. Now, you and I are experiencing the UK market. Do you see a challenge for managers to get into other new markets? Other, you've been doing this for 25 years. What do you think are the lessons you can share with our listener for winning and losing those mandates?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also, one size doesn't fit all. As if you talk about people going into new markets, I've seen in the past a lot of incredibly successful, say, I'm just using an example here, a US manager who's got an incredible name and an incredible brand in the US. And then they come over to the UK and they can't understand why they haven't raised loads of assets in the first 6 or 12 months. And it's because they're using exactly the same pitch book that they use in the US. And also it's easier for them because everybody knows who they are in the US. They come over to the UK, nobody's heard of them. They don't have the brand recognition. And also the way it works here, the way allocators pick funds is different to the way they do it in the US. So I think it's about obviously tailoring your pitch to the audience and understanding, more importantly, who you're trying to target, how the UK works, how Europe works, how the Middle East work are all very different. Mm. And you need to understand that investor base and listen to them as well. We talk a lot in this industry about, we listen to our clients, we listen to the investor base. Do we? Or do we just do exactly what we think they want to hear rather than really listening? And also about timing it. There's another thing that I've experienced. I've been told during the course of my career, go out, sell this. And you're like, well, it's not the right time. I know for a fact that investor doesn't want this right now. We have to hold off, or the product's not quite in the shape that it needs to be. So I think it's one about understanding the investor needs and also making sure your timing is right, because I say it all the time, you get one chance, in front of people. If you go out and you don't get it right, doors probably permanently shut.
You've blown it. I think I look back and I go back 30 something years in this industry, and back then I could go into a client meeting with a fact sheet, name more about the product than the client did, because access to data just didn't exist. They didn't have the information. The internet didn't exist, so they couldn't Google anything. That you literally could only rely on the information you shared with them in a physical form. Today, that is far more difficult for a salesperson to walk in with a fact sheet and present the product, because the person that's sitting opposite has probably already got as much information, if not more, than the salesman has got it out in their hand. Now, I know there are products out there and there are companies, is it Fundcraft or something that is out there, produces documentation for salespeople, and that's great. But do you feel that those tools are useful? I know this is not something you may have a direct experience on, but do you feel the tools that are available today help when it comes to cracking a new market, or is it the same old shoe leather and phone calls and getting the meetings in the diary?
No, I don't think it is the same old shoe leather. I always hated that expression anyway. And I think those tools are very useful, and used correctly can really benefit, but you've got to then use it with your relationships as well. So I think in terms of, there used to be the time it was like, great, you've got this big contact list, and for the much older generation, the Rolodex, and that would be pretty much all you need. But it's not just about access now. It's not just about knowing the right people. It's about relevance as well. It's about, is your product relevant to the people you're talking to? And I think that also goes back to the question that we all ask ourselves in this industry: what do investors really want? And I think we've got better at that. When I first started out, I remember once being, we've launched this fund, go out and sell it. And
Yeah.
you know, you sit there and say, well, why have we launched it? Does anybody want it? Did we even
but
think
did anyone
of
come and
asking
speak to
people?
you? Did the product development team come and talk to the distribution team? Probably not.
No, not at all.
So where does the idea come from? Does it come from the CIO, the CEO, or who's thinking about
Yeah,
these things?
potentially a team of incredibly clever people saying we can do this, let's put it all together. But then no one thought to say, well, does anybody want this? Now, I do think things have evolved a lot. And I do think, you know, I've been there. You get roundtables of potential investors to find out what the gaps are, what their pain points are, what they're looking for. But I even think there a lot still needs to be done. I mean, I've seen it as well. Firms, whether it's boutiques, big firms, start with great intentions. We're going to launch this product. We're going to launch this fund. This is exactly what a lot of the client base, the investor base want. But then amazingly, when it actually gets to market, it looks nothing like what the investor actually asked for, because too many people, you know, have got involved. It's like, I think of it, a good analogy is, you know, you say to somebody, I'm going to bake you your favorite cake for your birthday, you know, and they ask for, I don't know, a lemon drizzle cake. I mean, I don't know, I don't really bake cakes. So
I do.
well, yeah, I don't. But then you set out, you start baking this lemon drizzle cake, then someone from the fund management team comes in and say, well, I'm going to add this chocolate because it's, you know, the best chocolate. Then compliance come in and say, well, it's got to be gluten free. You know, marketing adds some nice, very expensive icing to it. Then you give it to the person and they don't even want a tiny slice of it because all they wanted was a lemon drizzle cake, as did all their friends and family. And, you know, I mean, that's a sort of a jesting analogy, and I'm in no way sort of comparing an amazing fund to a cake, but I think it's a good example of what does happen. I think the intentions are there to provide the investors what they want, but then too many people get involved, and what you end up with, nobody actually wants. And then the big question comes, why aren't you selling it? Why is nobody buying it? Why is nobody allocating to it?
I now have this image from your analogy there of a CEO sitting there like King Louis in France saying, and Marie Antoinette going, let them eat cake. I think that you're absolutely right, that by the time a product's come to market, it's nothing like what was originally conceived in the conversation with the fund selector, the fund buyer, or the distribution team. And I think that's where, to a certain extent, is where boutique managers can help. I mean, we work with a lot of boutique managers, and I know over your career you've worked with sometimes boutique managers and some of the larger managers. Do you see a big advantage with boutiques? And I know there are some challenges with being a boutique fund manager, and we might touch on those later. But do you see the big advantage when it comes to launching a boutique or boutique manager with a differentiated strategy in the market? And how do you think, if you maybe will give us some of your insights to how you think those boutique managers can beat some of the big boys out there?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a massive advantage. I think there were tough times, especially post the financial crisis for boutiques, because people obviously wanted to go back to maybe the stability of the bigger players. But I think there's definitely a place for them, and I've always leaned towards them. You know, my heart's often sort of lay in that area more, because I think actually the fact that they're small is often like, I suppose, their superpower, because they have that edge. You know, and they also they take out the layers that you get in some of the big firms, so that the access to the boutiques for the end investor is obviously a lot better. Also, a lot of these boutiques, you know, they've been set up because they're managers that have left the bigger players because they don't like many aspects of this, and it enables them to get away and do exactly what they're good at, and do it in a way with sort of, I suppose, less constraints than you get at some of the bigger firms. I think the reason sometimes boutiques get it wrong is because they try and be too much like the bigger players. They try and copy what they're doing, whether that's in their marketing literature. They try and sound exactly the same, and then they just sort of blur into what people have heard so many times.
Is that
And
because they think that's the right way to do it, or is it just because for legacy reasons they've done that in their previous lives and they feel that's what they should be doing?
I think it's a mixture of the two. I
Right.
think it's one wanting to sound like everyone else so that people think that it's safe, you know, they're used to hearing, whether it's the themes or whatever it might be. But I think they lose that then, because also if that is then appealing to the end investor, you sounding like a big player, they'll just go to the big player anyway. You know, you need to make it clear that you're doing something really different, really niche, and also make it clear what you don't do. Differentiate yourselves from those big players. Don't just try and sound like them, because I can't see how that could be appealing to an allocator.
Okay, interesting. I think it is a challenge for boutique managers to get their message across, and I think a lot of them fail in those early days. And I agree with your point, which is that they try and behave like large managers rather than the smaller banks that they are, and that differentiation. And I know there are a number of people out there who are huge proponents of boutique managers, and a good friend of ours, Stacey Havener at Havener Capital, talks about boutiques a lot. You get someone like Simon Evan Cook over at Downing is a big supporter, Dean Cheeseman at Mattioli Woods, but they are in the minority on the whole who really are big proponents of them. In the traditional wealth management space, do you see, and a bit of a side question here, but do you see opportunities in other markets? And it's going back to that cracking new markets question earlier on, which is, do you see other channels where boutiques should be looking for opportunities for investors? Maybe like family offices, for example.
Oh yeah, well that's exactly what I was about to say. Definitely family offices, because they're obviously, I think they're probably more drawn to boutiques. I mean, it depends what family office you're talking about, but because they need to show that they're adding value, and rather than just having the name of these big firms that you can buy directly through platforms, to have a smaller and less known name will definitely appeal to the family offices and some of the smaller wealth managers. I think a reason a lot of people do go for the bigger names is security, because I think a lot of people think, well, if I choose this fund of this big name, I won't mention any names obviously, but they're probably less likely to lose their job if the fund blows up compared to an unknown boutique manager, which is wrong. But I do think that's why a lot of people still gravitate to the bigger names. And as you say, there are less people willing to take the plunge, I suppose, on this unknown boutique.
Do you think, okay, in that instance, how do you think boutique managers can overcome those issues, those challenges, as far as that resistance because of the risks associated with the boutique manager, or perceived risk, perceived risk with a boutique manager? I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about the fund blowing up, the company not being around, the key man risk, size of assets. Are those the issues you're referring to?
Yeah, but I mean, you can get that with bigger firms. You can get fund managers leave for big firms, can't you? So that can happen anywhere. And is any company that bulletproof? I don't think it is. But I think it's about building up the trust with your client base. And that takes time. Having said that, a boutique, I think, can do that quicker because, as I've said, those layers aren't there as they are in a big firm. Also, I think a boutique, it's back to what I said earlier. Get your story straight. Make sure you've got a clean, concise, simple story. Again, it doesn't mean what you're doing. I think people are terrified of making it simple because it sounds that what they're doing is simple. It's not. You can get into the nitty gritty later on, the due diligence process later on, but be clear about what you do, because if you've got a strong message that everybody understands, because you've got to remember the people that you're talking to, they need to explain it to their investment committee, they need to explain it to their boss, they need to explain it to their underlying client, and they need to be able to do that quickly and concisely. So if you get the message right, you can then, because of social media, that message can spread very quickly. That can get reposted across a load of different platforms a lot quicker than it could have done, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's the key, but that's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of boutique managers will listen to this and go, yeah, but how do you do that? Because we all know, as ex-fund salesperson, but someone who understands the process, getting the first meeting is tough, but the toughest one is getting the second meeting, because if you don't make it in that first meeting, you'll never get a second meeting. And you may well have blown as a salesperson, you may have blown your reputation, particularly if you're introducing a strategy or a manager who clearly doesn't stand up to muster as far as the fund due diligence. So when we talk about getting a second meeting, are you got any tips? Are there any areas that when you're in that first meeting for a boutique manager to get back in with a second time?
You've got to leave your allocator wanting to learn more.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to what I've said, and that's how you start building the trust. You know, if you're clear about what you do, and like I've said, what you don't do, people begin to believe you and trust you. If you waffle for ages and have talked about what you do for 10 minutes, and at the end of it, people still aren't clear, you're never going to get that second meeting.
Yeah.
You know, and that you can apply that to everyday life. It's like a bit like if you ask somebody what they do for a living. We've all done that, and they've spoken about it for 5 minutes, and at the end of it, you're still thinking, I still don't know what they do. I've no idea what they do. And you end up changing the subject because you feel a bit awkward about asking them anymore, because you still think, I just don't know what it is, what they do. Whereas if somebody sort of says to you, I don't know, I'm an architect, chances are you're still talking about architecture 20 minutes later,
Yeah.
because you're intrigued to find out more. So I think it's being upfront about what you do and leaving the allocator wanting to learn more about your process, about your team, about other investors that you've got in the fund.
I can certainly empathise with that, and having been married for 35 years, my wife still doesn't understand what I do. So maybe I'm not articulating it very well. So I had to learn from that one. So let's talk about, I said at the top of this call that we're going through very, very difficult times as far as capital raising. Money has still been raised, but there was news today about the 2 months now global equity funds have hemorrhaged assets. So how does a fund manager how does this industry try and remain relevant? And how do we keep that get those messages across to keep us relevant in this marketplace?
I think that's about making sure you're targeting people correctly, and doing it the right way. And I think that's how distribution has changed and will continue to change. Gone are the days of how many meetings can I cram in this week just to, go out and see as many people as possible, when chances are you might see 50 people. Chances are probably only 2 that are relevant. Obviously, always ensuring you follow up those meetings correctly, so you're always in that person's mind. And rather than doing your homework properly on the people that you're talking to, don't send out mass emails targeting to 300, 400 people, whatever it might be, but understanding the business, taking the time to do that research in whichever way you can. And making sure it is targeted them and understanding them. And also, I think, accepting sometimes that perhaps what you've got isn't right for them at that moment in time, and acknowledging that, because I think that gives you a lot of credibility with an allocator. If you say, look, be honest, I don't think this is right for you now, but it might be in 6, 12 months time, whatever, but don't forget me, remember me. And I'm pretty much guaranteed that allocator will remember that, and they will come back to you if the time's right for them.
Yeah, I mean the point there is it's about quality rather than quantity, and also about honesty.
Yeah,
absolutely. I recall many years ago when I actually told a allocator to sell one of the funds, and to this day that fund allocator thinks I walk on water. Just couldn't believe that I was being so honest. But the fund manager said my strategy is going to be no good. And we've had some big calls like that over the years. Scott McGlashan, who's at Perpetual, called the Japanese market. He said, "Sell my fund," and that was in the 90s, and he was absolutely right. And no one's been to Japan since, I don't think.
No. I also, to add to that, Stuart, as well, I do think if you're doing something quite different as well, you've got to make sure you're educating people properly about it and taking a step back. I had that experience, when I worked for a digital assets and crypto firm. We really had to take things back, because a lot of the people, and these were really intelligent people I was talking to, but some of them barely understood, say, what Bitcoin was. And we were talking about a much bigger universe. So we had to strip all that back. So if it is something quite different, a niche you're doing, strip it back, because don't assume that the people you're talking to are gonna know, have the level of detail that you do, because that's your niche area.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Particularly if you are coming out with something which is quite niche, is relatively new in the asset class. Again, we did a project some years ago with 24 Asset Management. We launched their funds back in 2009, and it was RMBS, synonymous with the financial crisis, and we had to educate as well as entertain. I learned a lot. About that. Let's as we come to the end of our chat, it's been interesting to listen to what you said and about where we are today. We've seen a huge amount of consolidation in the funds distribution arena. We've seen firms like Janus Henderson's halving their sales team to really try and reflect where the market is going, or where they perceive the market is going. Without suggesting you've got a crystal ball in front of you, where do you see the future of fund distribution going over the next maybe 2-3 years? What's your view?
I think it's about, I think you're going to have to be very clever, and I think it's about reinvention and this constant evolution. And when I say reinvention, that's not about sort of stripping everything away and starting again, but evolving how you do things and working with the new tools that are available as well. So you've got to embrace AI. You've got to embrace all the new data that's available, and be honest about what isn't working as well. Don't just stick with, well, we've always done it this way, let's just carry on. Well, it's not working now, is it? So find out what is working, speak to other people, but evolve. And I think the industry, we say that we like change and we're all sort of looking at the new thing, but do we always? We don't. We often sit doing things in exactly the same way and fear some of, like I mentioned, maybe AI and all the new data that's available for us. But also don't ever forget that relationships are important. I mean, I'm obviously going to say that because that's what I've done for the majority of my career. But if you combine that with all the new tools available, I think that's going to be very, very powerful. But it's only the people that do that are going to survive in the next decade or so. The ones that don't, I think that they'll just fade into the background.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I know a dear friend of mine who I know who's I won't say his name to save his blushes, but he's a new breed of fund salespeople. He's got all the tools and he knows more about his product than any fund sales guy of my generation would have known about that product. So there are people out there doing it. So it's good to see.
Yeah.
Liz, it's been great to catch up. Thank you so much for your time today. I know people want to get in touch with you, so we'll put your details at the end of this video. In the meantime, thanks for your time, and we'll catch up soon. I look forward to speaking to you in the very near future.
Great. Thank you very much, Stuart.
Take care.
Bye.